Hello, Crust members, and welcome to part 4 of our 10-part series on commercial invoicing explained. Today we're going to discuss a little bit about how important communication is. Remember, we went back to the ABCDs. A, so far we've covered agreed upon scope. B, we covered basis of invoicing. Today we're going to cover C, the communication aspect of our project. Very, very important. We said before that communication and documentation will help you get paid. But in communication, we have to be willing to communicate everything we do on a project to everyone on the project. It's not enough to just communicate with the homeowner or the property owner or the property manager. We must be in contact with all the players. If you remember back on part 1 of our series, we talked about all the different sides to the claim and all the different players. Well, it's really important for you during your mitigation process to be as communicative and transparent as you can with all of those players. So let's just make sure we understand. If there's a change in scope, you want to make sure that you're communicating that change in scope to everyone involved, not just the property owner or the manager. Make sure the adjuster is aware of this. Make sure the adjuster's experts are aware of this. Have a discussion with them regarding what exactly changed, why you needed to change, and how you're going to mitigate the extra added expense or time that this change will cause. Your daily activities are something you should be communicating all the time. It's very, very important to make sure everybody knows what you've done that day. Our process is very simple, and we'll get into this later when we talk about the different types of documentation. But what we'd like for you to do is we'd like for you to assign somebody specifically to the project to be in charge of all communications. That person will get an overview from each of the project managers and crew leaders as to exactly what they did during the day. Hopefully, they will have filled out activity logs to document such things. These activity logs and any other verbal communication must be codified every single day by your communications person in a daily activity summary that will go to all the parties. If any issues arise on the project that anybody needs to be made aware of, you need to make sure everybody's aware. Something as simple as someone came to the job site who wasn't part of this team. Maybe a member of OSHA showed up at the job site. Maybe someone else came out from a different part of the carrier process. We need to make sure we communicate those to everybody. Maybe someone on your team suffered an injury. We need to make sure everybody's aware of that as well. Any liabilities that may come up. If something happened overnight on the job site when you guys weren't manning it, maybe there was some vandalism or some theft. All of that has to be communicated. There's no reason to keep those for yourself. Timelines for completion must constantly be assessed, updated, and then communicated to all the parties. It is not enough to say, we'll be done when we're done. Those short, smug answers might work on some difficult clients, or they might work on some difficult adjusters in the residential world, but in the commercial world, again, we're part of a much bigger game that we have to make sure we understand our role and our part. We must be communicating if anything comes up that's going to cause a delay in the timeline, or hopefully if anything that comes up that might cause the timeline to move up. These must be communicated. Remember, there are many, many other factors involved in when you finish than just you getting out of there and submitting your invoice. Let's make sure we communicate that. Speaking of invoices, we should not wait till the end of a commercial project in order to start submitting invoices. We should be able to submit progress invoices every 3 or 4 days at best, at worst, once a week on longer projects. As we go through the next steps in this series, we're going to make sure that we teach you how to make perfectly clear that you're going to be submitting these invoices, and we're going to give you all the tools to be able to do that. I think that if I asked you guys to be honest with yourselves, I think very few of you right now would be able to produce progress invoices for every 3rd or every 4th day. In fact, I would venture to say that a good many of you would not even be able to create an invoice on the day after you left for the entire project. Well, Following the Crest Network systems and processes, you're going to be able to not only create these progress invoices, but on the day you pull out your equipment, within 24 hours, you're going to have your entire invoice submitted as well. We're going to show you how to do that. But just beware, it's very important that you communicate those progress invoices with everyone as well. Finally, let's talk about some support materials. If you have documentation coming in, there's no reason to hold any of that back. If you're doing readings on some long-term drawing, there's no reason to hold any of that back. Let's start producing documentation, which we're going to cover in the next session. But let's start producing it and let's start passing that along. Very important. Now, what type of communication are we talking about on these projects? My answer to that is all kinds. Obviously, the number one top communication form would be face-to-face. Visual meetings and walkthroughs as often as possible are very important. If the adjuster has experts on site, walk them around daily, share information with them, keep them in the loop. If your owner has a representative there or the property manager is there all the time, make sure they're an active part of what's going on a daily basis. Show them the progress you're making. Get them excited with how fast things are moving. Next, let's talk about phone calls. It's very important to be communicative. Phone calls serve a great purpose because you can get somebody's tone and tenor from a phone call that you can't get from any kind of digital forms of communication. So get on the phone with them, especially if there's an issue. You want to be able to gauge where they're at. You want to be able to gauge where they're at on any issue that may come up right away. You don't want to leave it for interpretation. So let's make sure we're using phone calls. As it says here, use a phone call as an alternative to face-to-face when an in-person conversation is impossible, but they're excellent for team meetings and check-ins when verbal instructions are needed. Okay? Email. We recommend the use of daily emails, not 6-7 times a day, but we recommend the use of daily emails, especially as it relates to being able to provide the daily activity logs and your prognosis for what yesterday was like and what today is going to be like. They're very, very important. If you look on here, they can be a useful tool when the paper trail is appropriate, and they can convey a lot of information in one specific email to a lot of people. Very important. We also have to use email when we have meetings or phone calls, just as a way of memorializing those conversations. I like to just make them very matter of fact and kind of put the heading saying overview of conversation. And then within the body of the text of the email, you're just going to describe to the best of your ability how you interpreted the conversation. If any decisions were made by you and the adjuster, you'd like to make sure all parties understand that the way you understand that. Let's put all that in an email, especially because this now guarantees that anybody reading the email understands it the way you do, or they will respond with questions. Okay, and finally, text messages. We should avoid text messages for anything that's important, but they're very important to use for confirming some information or for just getting some simple check-in information. Hey, if you're looking to go find out where one of your crew leaders is, hey, where are you? They'll text back, hey, I'm on the 4th floor. That's great. That kind of messaging is important. That's a communications tool, and that works real well. Again, there's proof through the text message that can always be put onto paper and put into the file of your claim and of your invoice, just so that all that communication is documented. Okay, I can't stress enough, guys, the importance of communication, open lines of communication. Anytime an issue comes up or anytime that there's something that's in dispute, all it's going to do is slow down or negate the ability for you to get paid on your invoice. So the most important thing right now is to understand that aside from what we discussed with getting agreed upon scopes and setting a basis, communication is your third real key for making sure that we're doing our work properly. Thank you very much, guys. We're going to finalize the next step in our ABCD process in part 5, which is coming up, and that's going to be entitled Documentation is Proof. I want to thank you so much for joining us here at the Crest Network, and you guys have a great day.